This is episode 4 of The Messenger, the Rachel cancer scam. Previously on The Messenger, I outlined for you the story that Rachel concocted about being involved in the Kristen Smart case, and how I began to assist Rachel in any way that I could. One day, out of the blue, I received a call from a woman called Laura. I didn't know Laura. Got the call, went to voicemail. I received a text, said I'm a friend of Rachel's, please call me as soon as possible. I called back. Rachel had been beaten up. Badly. Again. This time broken ribs, black eye, fat lip, and more. She didn't want any visitors except for Laura. Laura said you can call her. But I was going through your phone. I know how important you are to her. She really loves you. I'm sure she'd love to hear your voice. And of course, I picked up the phone. We talked. It would turn out that this beating wasn't the worst part of the story. She told me that in addition to the beating, she also needed to share with me that when they ran blood work on her, they found that she had non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. As it turns out, the silver lining in this brutal and unforgivable beating was that Rachel's cancer was caught early and treated with a mild level of chemo. This would be Rachel's first go-around with non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. About a year and a half passed, maybe a bit longer, I received another call from Laura. Cancer is back. And this time, Rachel attempted suicide. She took a bunch of pills. Rachel and I spoke. We spoke a bunch. But this time, according to Laura, Rachel had a new man in her life that had come to her rescue. His name was Bobby. And Bobby came from good stock, as they say. He was a stand-up guy. Wasn't going to tolerate any nonsense from Mark. He loved her and would stand by her side. And as it would turn out, he asked her to marry him. I did feel a tinge of jealousy about Bobby through the happiness. Jealousy's a rough emotion to feel, there's no question about it. Rachel didn't tell me much, but she did share that Bobby was in the wine business in the Paso Robles area, and that his father had a big law firm up that way. I called Laura back some days later, and we spoke, and she said that Rachel was in good hands now, and that I shouldn't worry. I said, what about Mark? She said, well, Bobby and Mark had a conversation, which didn't go well for Mark, and Mark would now be out of the picture. Again, I felt a sense of relief. I think I felt like if she wasn't going to be my girl, at least she was someone that felt like she was his. And hopefully he would watch out for her and watch over her. It's all I could hope for. Rachel alleged that beating at the hands of Mark and the diagnosis of non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. She'd later tell me that Bobby wasn't a real hospital kind of guy. Didn't want to be around sick people. It just wasn't his thing. She also mentioned something interesting, which Bobby said at a doctor's appointment when she accompanied Rachel. They told her about a medication that she would be using that would put some weight on her. Bobby responded with, how much weight are we talking about? Probably not the right response in a doctor's office to a former pageant queen who was forced to be between 100 and 105 pounds most of her young adult life. Image, body image, and worth, they've always been issues for Rachel, as they are for so many women. And for Rachel, worth was centered around looks and weight and just being good enough. She'd always say that to me. I just feel like I'm not good enough. To this day, it's the same for her. Not a picture goes out of her phone without a filter or Photoshop, ever. Rachel claims that when she was a young girl, her mother forced multiple plastic surgeries on her to give Rachel a certain look that her mother thought would help her compete and win pageants. Now, my research tells me that beyond some lipo and a breast augmentation, she had a couple of nose jobs, and that was it. And honestly, regarding her weight, it didn't matter whether Rachel was the 105 pounds she was when I met her or the 160 pounds she weighs right now. We talked periodically during her marriage to Bobby, and in early 2017, Rachel contacted me and told me she had left Bobby because he was a sex addict. He insisted on watching porn and visiting prostitutes. He made her sleep with him and his friend Greg at the same time, something that she claims ruined the relationship. And the straw that broke the camel's back, Bobby had a relationship with another woman that he'd been keeping time with, and now she was pregnant. She had had enough, she said, and she left. Bobby's father was an attorney, and he helped Rachel pick up the pieces after what his son had done, and Rachel received a hefty settlement from Bobby out of his trust. Bobby's father, Robert Sr., in Rachel's story, was not only her advocate, but he was also the person that allowed Rachel to work under him as an attorney as she studied for and passed the bar, according to Rachel. Rachel called me one day out of the blue sometime after that split and the settlement and told me that Bobby was dead of a drug overdose. And that would be the end of Bobby. Or would it? Give me a minute, and I'll get back to that. In theory, this would be, as it turns out, the first murder she would commit on the timeline. Well, murder of someone in her story. Maybe the killing off of someone in her story. That's a better way to say it. Bobby's alleged death was sometime in 2017. She also ended up killing off Bobby's father, Robert Sr., in 2022 from COVID. Bobby's mother, Rebecca, 2023 from cancer. We've got Samantha, and we've got Stephanie. As you can probably guess, rumors of Bobby's death were greatly exaggerated. As it turns out, Bobby is alive and well and living in Houston. And I know this because I've talked to Bobby extensively. As a matter of fact, when I told Bobby where Rachel lives now in Paso Robles, he had no idea where that was. And then I mentioned San Luis Obispo, and he said, "I've never heard of that place either. Where's that?" Like several others in the story, I've been asked to remove his last name and what he does now. I've agreed to that request, and revealing his identity and information would serve no purpose other than to give you sleuths someone to track down, so not on my watch. As far as I'm concerned, Bobby is collateral damage who took 2 in the back of the head, execution style, in Rachel's story. What I would come to learn is that Bobby was involved with Rachel at one point during her first marriage. A marriage she told me never happened because she left her fiancé Todd at the altar in Hawaii. She was just 19 or 20 living in Houston. Rachel married this man called Todd, who's still living and working in Texas. He left Rachel after finding out that Rachel had cheated on him several times during the first 6 months of their marriage, including with Bobby. And in the same way that I protected Bobby, you can bet your ass that I'm going to protect a guy named Todd, who was a cop, became an assistant DA, and is now an attorney in Texas. So let's get back to the scorecards for a moment. Let's tally up the 3 scorecards we have. Rachel's career lies. Lawyer. False. Never went to law school, never sat for the bar, and has no law license on file anywhere. Ever. Nurse. This is also a lie. Never went to nursing school. Has no license on file with the California Board of Nursing. Pilot. False. She's only taken 2 flying lessons. She doesn't have a license. Isn't qualified to fly a plane or a helicopter. No Cessna, no Bell, no Boeing. And there's no one with her name or birth date registered in the FAA database. Pilot and nurse for Mercier. Also false. Called Mercier's corporate office to verify employment. Led to that line I told you about. We have no one here by that name. Their legal department actually called me back. And a PhD in aeronautical science or aeronautics or whatever it was. Also false. Rachel, not a doctor. Total career lies, 5. Rachel's husband. Mark now moves to husband 2 in the lineup. And Todd is batting lead. Top of the lineup. The man we thought was husband 2, Bobby, actually never married Rachel and did not die of an overdose. You should now remove him from your scorecards, the husband scorecards. So, total husbands remain at 2 with 1 substitution. At the top of the lineup, Todd. People that Rachel has killed off so far in the story, or as I like to say, the alleged murders committed by Rachel. Her sister Sherry, False. It's a lie, very much among the living. Bobby? False. Alive and living in parts unknown Texas. Robert Sr., Bobby's father, and Rebecca, his mother, still remain unverified if they're actually his parents or actually still alive. I've nominated them both as most likely to be fake all around. Remember, Bobby wasn't a husband. He was just a side piece, as they say. Rachel's dear friend Stephanie died of her own hand, a tragic suicide, and her client, Samantha, gunned down in cold blood in the streets of Paso. Both of those also false. Our murder total is now 6. Now, keep in mind that a former peer of Rachel's, at least in the prostitution business, a famous woman by the name of Eileen Warnos, was a profound and prolific serial killer. She killed 7 people herself. We'll continue to watch this number as the story goes on. Rachel and her friend Laura claimed that Rachel was involved with Bobby from sometime in 2014 to 2017. She and I didn't have much contact during this time. Rachel had furnished me with some pictures periodically to keep me thinking about her. Pictures, some of which are not fit for publication, if you're following me. Pictures were not taken while she was married to Bobby, because she was never married to Bobby. She was married to Mark. And pictures she also sent to another man that I found out afterwards. Rachel and I reconnected for what led to this scam about cancer and pregnancy, and everything else started in August of 2021. August 27th of 2021, to be exact. Do keep in mind that at that time, I was of the belief that she and Mark had been split up since 2012. I thought she had married and divorced Bobby, and that Bobby was deceased. Over the summer of 2021, she'd been sending me texts and pictures asking for a visit, suggesting that she book us a spa weekend in Sedona, inviting me on trips, sending me pictures, as she often did. As it turns out, Mark was actually on those trips. She just never counted on me saying yes, and I never did. We scheduled the weekend of August 27th as a time to visit, and the plan was in motion. My plan to see Rachel, and maybe her cancer scam. On the next episode of The Messenger, the one about the date where I told her I'd be all in. Next time on The Messenger.